Hey guys, welcome to the HesCP channel. I'm your HesCP. It's 12:15 a.m. and you know what time that is? It's dinner time for programmers. But before I eat, I want to give you guys some advice on the final project. I'll give you 5 tips and tricks, actually 6 tips and tricks, so that your final project is just as successful as my final project. So let's get into it. Before we start, let me eat something. I'm a little bit hungry, so I'll be eating soylent today. Let's open that up. There we go. Now, tip number 1 for the final project: don't team up with your friends. Unless, of course, you know their work ethic. As you may or may not know, group projects is one of the best ways to destroy friendships. Normally when you and your friends are hanging out, you're just watching movies, playing games, getting food together, it's no big deal. Your grade doesn't depend on it. Everyone's just having a good time. So, it's no big deal hanging out with your friends. But when it comes to coursework, it's different. Your grade depends on it. And when it comes to doing work, sometimes people show their true colors. Some people, they would just avoid doing any work at all costs. And that wouldn't show normally when you're just hanging out and having fun, getting food, getting boba. But it shows during projects like these, and especially intense projects like the final project, where you really need all hands on deck. So unless you know your friend's work ethic, you know that that person's gonna work. Just don't team up with your friends. It's easier to unfriend someone that you don't know, some stranger, because you're not friends, so you can't really unfriend your not friend. But it's hard for you to really tell your friend, hey, stop being lazy, start doing work, please. We're getting our deliverables late, we're not meeting our deadline. It's hard to say that. And when you don't say that and that person just refuses to work on him or her own, you have to carry her weight. And your other team members are all going to suffer. All your team's going to suffer because of that one person. So again, don't team up with your friends on this project unless you know that your friend's going to work and that your friend isn't useless. I mean, if that person's useless, why are you still friends with them? Tip number 2 is to be ambitious and think big for your idea. Some of the final projects I've seen over the past few semesters is that they're all just really, really simple. It's a web app that turns your images into pixels or blurs them or whatever. But they're all really, really simple. And to me, it's a little bit underwhelming. And when you build a final project for 201, you really want to build something that's special for you, because this is the one time that you actually have the chance to build something meaningful with your team and even expand upon the project after the finals do. For me, the idea of my project was to replace an app called Archive that we used to track attendance. The terrible thing about that app is that in order for a student to view his own attendance history, you actually have to pay the app, which I think is just ridiculous. So our app first started off as a free archive, and then we expanded upon that idea and we thought, wouldn't it be nice to add some in-class Q&A functionality? Because when you're taking 170, 270, those algorithms classes, or 104, the professor talks about something, goes on and on about like 15 minutes, and then he says, pretty cool. And basically he's saying, any questions? And 90% of the class, you can tell that they're confused, because I was at 90%, but nobody was saying anything because nobody wanted to look stupid. So that's why I thought, wouldn't it be nice to make an app that updates real time in class of all the questions that people want to ask? They can just ask pseudo-anonymously on the app so that they don't have to embarrass themselves. There's also a voting system in place like Reddit where people can upvote the questions that they feel are relevant. Plus, we wanted to make it multi-platform, so we wanted to make it Android, iOS, and web. So as you can tell, it's kind of ambitious, and I think that's a good thing because it gives you a vision that you can expand upon in the future. Now, my number 3 tip is actually to be realistic. Now you might say, whoa, hang on there. You just told us to be ambitious, and now you're telling us to be realistic? Hear me out here. It's good to have big ideas at first, but then because you only have 2 months, and then in that 2 months you need to do a bunch of documentation, and of course you have other classes to worry about, so there really is a limited amount of time that you can spend on those final projects. So you want to be ambitious when you're thinking about the projects, when you're coming up with the ideas, because you don't want your project to be useless. But also after the ambition, after the initial proposal, you should talk to your team and really organize your time and find out what's the core thing about your project that people want. So, and then trim it down to the core thing, to that core concept of your project, and complete it, complete it, and do it well. For the final presentation, make sure what you have is 100% functional, because what I've seen in the past is that people have those great ambitious ideas, but they fail to trim their idea so that it could be realistic. So what ends up happening is that towards the very end, they crunch and they crunch, but even with that, for the final presentation, their product wasn't complete. And although, like, I knew that they were ambitious, that their idea was excellent, but it just doesn't give a great impression when your product is broken during the demo, or not even complete in some cases. So my advice to you would be to think big, but then trim it back and build on the core. And make sure that what you have is 100% functional when it comes to the final presentation. Now, my fourth tip is for team members to clearly separate their responsibilities. Make sure that each person is clear on what they have to accomplish and what they're responsible for. You don't want to end up with a part of your project that nobody wants to touch because you didn't assign anyone to deal with that specific aspect. But also, you don't want to be too rigid with your responsibilities, because you don't want one person to finish his part of the project really quickly, and then you have another person who's just suffering and then slowly crunching through his part. And the other person just goes, I'm done, I'm not responsible for his part, so I'll just sit back and do my other thing and not help him out. But keep in mind that this is a team effort. Although you have completed your part, so if you're done but your team member is still struggling, feel free to help that team member out. Actually, you should, because again, this is a team effort. You're all working as a team delivering one product, and you're all getting the same grade for the presentation. So for your own sake and for everyone else's sake, just, have clear responsibilities assigned, but also help out other team members when they're struggling. And my number 5 tip is that do not learn something from scratch on the fly. I've seen people that wanted to build an iOS app, but they had no idea how to do iOS before they started. So they think that they can learn as they go, and then they end up with a super terrible looking app that has zero functionality. It looks crappy, it looks like some beginner project. Don't do that. Work on things that you already know. Of course, I'm not saying don't learn new things for the final project, because you should. But what I'm saying is don't learn it from scratch. Let's say you want to learn how to integrate AWS into your Java servlets. That's fantastic, because you already know how the servlet works, and you're learning some new plugin that sits on top of what you already know how to do. Learning a language takes time, and each language has its own quirks and features. So you don't want to rush through it, not know what you're doing, and just rush out a product that looks terrible. Plus, you're going to spend way too much time on the project because you got to learn and you code, and as you learn more, you look at the code you wrote earlier and you go, oh, this is completely crap. I have to rewrite this. And then you're just in a constant cycle of learning, writing code, refactoring, learning, writing, refactoring, and you can never really progress. So that's a big issue. And especially when you have limited time for the final project, you don't want to risk it. And my 6th tip for having a good final project is just to get good. Like, why are you so bad? Why don't you just get good? Just get good at 201, then you'll be fine. Stop being bad. Come on, it's that easy. Be good, like me. Just wake up tomorrow and decide, I'm going to be good. I'm going to get good. And then you're good, and then you're fine. So these are my tips and tricks for you for having a successful 201 final project. I hope you learned something from this video, and if you did, please give me a like and subscribe. Give me over to 100 so I can start monetizing. Thank you. Thank you for watching, and I'll finish my dinner.